As it is precisely 10 o'clock, or close to it, the committee will come to order. Good morning and welcome. This is our first oversight hearing under HRES 40, and the hearing will focus on the 2008 audit review by the Inspector General of the U.S. Election Assistance Commission. The audit found that the EAC was unable to provide sufficient accounting records to conduct an audit in compliance with the standards set forth by the Comptroller of the United States. Today we will discuss potential misallocation of resources, lack of internal controls on matters related to grant accounting and agency expenditures. Unfortunately, this most recent report is one in a string of reports about the EEC's inability to operate as a fully functioning agency. The EAC's first audit of financial statements in fiscal year 2008 could not be completed because the EAC was unable to provide sufficient accounting records to conduct an audit in accordance with the standards set forth by the Comptroller General. Additional IG reports have also revealed that the EAC lacks adequate policies and procedures that govern the application, award, reporting, oversight, and closing of HAVA grant programs. The EAC also does not have a fund control to monitor expenditures to ensure compliance with congressional requirements. This lack of financial controls has resulted in travel being taken without prior authorization, activities that take the EAC out of compliance with the federal travel regulations. Beyond the audit concerns, EAC has also engaged in questionable management of resources. The EAC has recently posted a job announcement for another executive position, which would push the senior staff count to 21 out of a total of 35 total full-time employees. And while I appreciate the EAC is trying to hire staff, it seems that it would make more sense to ensure that mid-level staff is in place to carry out the EAC's programmatic responsibilities. The IG report warns that while hiring qualified administrative staff goes a long way towards improving EAC's financial management function, the EAC should use caution to avoid staffing one program or function to the detriment of its other programs. The EAC has been before us several times and has listened to our concerns about the agency's management practices and has taken some steps to correct these problems, and we do want to acknowledge that. The EAC has recently hired a chief financial officer and a chief operating officer to manage financial operations and install funding controls. The EAC has also restructured its grant division into two departments to improve program operations. Now, I'm eager to hear what additional steps the EAC will be taking to increase the Commission's accountability this morning. The EAC plays a critical role in funding and assisting states to improve election processes. It must continue to develop effective financial controls to implement these processes so that we know grants and agency funds are being accounted for and appropriately used. This hearing today, I hope, will not only lay out for us in greater detail the IG's advice and findings, but also give us an opportunity from the EAC themselves to hear what their action plan and thoughts are. At this point, I would yield to the gentleman from Mississippi for any opening statement he may have.
Thank you very much, Chairwoman Lofgren. I want to certainly thank the Chair for calling today's EAC oversight hearing. As a new member on this panel, any chance to learn more about the organizations under this subcommittee's jurisdiction is very helpful. And I look forward to hearing from our EAC commissioners as well as the Inspector General and the Executive Director of the EAC. I've had the opportunity to review the findings of the EAC's Inspector General, and I'm concerned with several areas of weakness that were uncovered by the IG's office during the course of compiling its report. For example, I understand that the initial audit of the EAC's financial records revealed such poor record keeping that a comprehensive financial analysis could not be completed. While some issues with record keeping are certainly expected the first time an organization's financial records are audited, I'm anxious to hear from our witnesses today regarding the state of the EAC's financial statements and what can be done to bring them into compliance with acceptable accounting practices. In addition, I also understand that the IG's findings revealed a notable disparity between the number of administrative positions at the EAC compared with the number of program positions. The IG's report revealed that the EAC currently has 21 positions that are designated as executive direction and administration, with only 14 positions in program, legal, and communications areas. Perhaps our witnesses can shed some light on hiring practices at the EAC and who determines what types of roles are mission critical in light of the Commission's priorities. For example, one of the key roles of the EAC is to certify voting machines for use in federal elections. My understanding is that to date, only one system has been certified as a result of a backlog at the EAC. Election officials and vendors alike have expressed frustration at the slow pace of the certification. So I have to question why resources are being allocated towards executive and administrative expenses when it seems that there's a real need to engage in substantive program work in order to fulfill the mission. An organization that is heavily weighted towards executive and administrative personnel certainly may lend itself to bureaucracy. How is the EAC applying effective personnel practices in order to ensure that the organization is able to carry out its charter as defined by HAVA without getting bogged down in bureaucratic processes? Finally, I understand that the Inspector General has provided the EAC with a list of recommended actions to address these and other gaps in internal operations. I'd like to get an update from our witnesses on the current status of this list and how to address internal barriers in the organization that may prevent the EAC from implementing these recommendations. Again, I thank all of our witnesses for appearing before us today and look forward to hearing your testimony. Thank you, Madam Chairman. I reserve the balance of my time.
Thank you. And Ms. Davis, unless you are eager to, will put your opening statement in the record and go directly to the Inspector General, Mr. Curtis Crider, Mr. Crider is the Inspector General for the U.S. Election Assistance Commission and has held this position since the year 2006. Mr. Crider has 32 years of auditing experience in the federal government and is a certified public accountant and internal auditor. Mr. Crider, we do have your full report, and by unanimous consent, it will be made part of our official record. We would ask that your oral testimony consist of about 5 minutes, and then we will have time to ask you questions. So we're eager to hear from you now.
Good morning. Thank you very much. Chairman Lofgren, Ranking Member McCarthy, and members of the subcommittee. Thank you for inviting me to testify today. I am pleased to be here this morning to discuss the activities of the Office of Inspector General and to provide insight as to the effectiveness of financial controls in place and efficiency of programs operated by the U.S. Election Assistance Commission. OIG strives to promote economy, efficiency, and effectiveness in EAC programs by conducting regular audits of recipients of grant funds distributed by the EAC, annual financial audit of EAC's operations, and periodic reviews and audits of EAC operations. In addition, the OIG conducts investigations in response to allegations against the EAC, its grant recipients, or third parties involved in the EAC programs. In today's testimony, I will focus on the OIG audits of HAVA funding recipients and the EAC. OIG has issued 19 audits of 19 states and is spending nearly $800 million. These audits resulted in questioning more than $11.7 million in cost and identified more than $10.7 million which the states must use for HAVA-related purposes. In total, the OIG has identified $22.4 million in audit findings at a cost of only $2 million to the federal government. In other words, our rate of return is 11 to 1. EAC management has agreed with most of our findings and upheld more than $20.9 million of the $22.4 million in audit exceptions. By and large, we have found that the states are not misusing HAVA funds. When we have found problems, they are in the areas such as lost interest, unsupported salaries, and understated matching funds. My written testimony contains a more complete listing of our findings that we have issued in our audits. We have currently 4 ongoing audits of states using HAVA funds. They are California, Iowa, Rhode Island, and Michigan. OIG has planned to audit several more states this year, but the number of states that we audit will depend upon the time, resources, and circumstances that may require audits and investigation in other areas. OIG is also responsible for auditing and reviewing EAC's programs. Over the past several years, the OIG has issued 8 reports regarding EAC operations. The 2 most comprehensive reports are the 2008 assessment of EAC's programs and financial operations, which was issued in February of 2008, and the audit of EAC's fiscal year 2008 financial statements, which was issued in November of 2008. All 8 reports except for one, the Internet Usage Report, contain findings and recommendations for the EAC to improve its processes. In the Internet Usage Report, we found that employees did not use gambling, pornographic, or other prohibited sites, and the EAC has sufficient controls to prevent unauthorized access to those sites. From the 8 reports, there are 82 recommendations for improvement, of which 14 have been fully implemented. EAC has made some progress toward implementing most of the other recommendations. Progress can be seen primarily in the areas of personnel reorganization and hiring persons to staff the administration division that have experience with federal government, procurement, and financial management. While hiring qualified administrative staff goes a long way to improving EAC's physical and financial management function, the EAC should use caution to avoid staffing one program or function to the detriment of its other programs. Based on its own reports, the EAC only last week adopted its strategic plan. It has not yet adopted policies and procedures needed to underlie the operations for many of its programs. In fiscal year 2009, the EAC will again be subject to a financial audit. Without these needed policies and procedures, the EAC may have difficulty in meeting the benchmarks necessary to receive an unqualified opinion. In addition to the fiscal year 2009 financial statement audit, the OIG will review EAC's compliance with the Federal Information Security Management Act, evaluate EAC's purchase of shirts and jackets for its employees, and assess EAC's internal controls over time and attendance. It is the Office of Inspector General's role to offer guidance and information through its audits, evaluation, reviews, and investigation that will help the EAC build and run programs that will instill public confidence by preventing fraud, waste, and abuse. The Office of Inspector General will continue to work with the EAC and the subcommittee to help promote efficient and effective government. I appreciate the opportunity this morning to provide this testimony regarding our the OIG activities, and I'll be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Crider. I would turn first to the gentleman from Mississippi to see what questions he may have.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you being here today and testifying before us. And I guess the first question I would have is your analysis of where they are on the progress based upon your last visit with them.
Okay. I think everybody should understand that this was the first year the EAC was audited, had its financial statements audited. A disclaimer in the first year is not uncommon because of having to go back and establish the beginning balances. And some of the accounting issues that were identified go back a number of years, even before there was an EAC, when GSA was doing the accounting for it. And that's where some of the issues and some of the findings in the report are. The fact that the EAC has hired a chief financial officer, I think is very promising. I think that will help a lot. But we are very concerned at this point that some of the accounting issues have not been resolved, and we're getting ready to start our audit hopefully next month, and that the underlying policies and procedures have not been adopted to this point. The EAC has a draft.
May I, and I hate to interrupt you, but how long have they had to adopt those policies or recommendations?
In February of 2008, we issued our first finding that they did not have policies and procedures, and so it's been a year now. I understand they have a draft of those policies and procedures, and they're working on those. But like I said, we are very concerned that we are already looking at, we're starting April here, and we don't have some of the underlying accounting issues resolved. And I think that there are some issues involving GSA that need to be looked at and resolved by the Commission in order to make this process go smoother in the future.
Prior to that first audit, had anyone contacted you from EAC to ask for assistance or say, look, we realize we have a problem, can you, help direct us prior to that audit time?
We have had ongoing discussions about some of the things that were missing, such as the A123 evaluations and the internal control issues that needed to be addressed. But we did not have a formal report at that point, but we had communications with the executive director, and they were aware of some of it, and they were trying to address some of the issues. But one of the problems with the EAC is that it's a very small agency. It has to comply with just about all the other federal requirements that are out there, and it's somewhat overwhelming for a small agency sometimes to have to do all this stuff. So they have to rely on sometimes outside parties to help them. And that, I think, has been one of the issues, is trying to get the right resources in place to get some of this stuff done.
And I certainly don't want to put words in your mouth, but are you saying they're really at this time not on the path that you think they should be?
They're getting there, but I think there's a lot of work to be done. Like I said, they just adopted their strategic plan last week. So there's going to be some problems with the financial statements this year. Like I said, we're hoping that we're expecting to see some significant improvements. At least that's what we're hoping for. and we're willing to work with the EAC to try to make sure those improvements get done. And that's what, so we'd like to see some improvement. There's a lot of work to be done yet.
And I know that your office recently hired the former general counsel of
Yes.
the EAC. How do you deal with that person when it comes to reviewing or looking at anything involving EAC?
Is that whenever we hired Ms. Hoskins as my general counsel, she prepared a list of all the items that she had worked on in terms of policy, procedures, and documents, and whether or not attorney-client privilege attached to those documents, and she will recuse herself from working on any of those matters. We have entered into a separate memorandum of understanding with another federal agency that if there is issues that we need outside counsel on that she cannot help us with, then we'll go to the outside counsel. And we've also set up a separate secure filing system that if we're working on things that she was involved with as part of the EAC, that she will not have access to any of that information.
Are you satisfied that that is working well?
Yes, it is. I am satisfied with that.
All right, if you had to identify the single biggest problem that you see that still exists with EAC, what would you say that was?
The lack of policies and procedures and lack of an internal control structure.
Okay. And your recommendations on how to fix that?
Is that they need to get their policies and procedures in place. They need to establish their internal control structure and do the risk assessments that are required by A123 to identify any weaknesses that they have and address their accounting and their underlying accounting issues.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. With that, I'll yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you. I would turn to my colleague from California, Congresswoman Davis.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Curtis. In your report, you cited a lack of expertise on the part of the state election officials as the reason for lapses in documentation, and I'm wondering, how do you feel the EAC could best train those officials? What role do they really play, and how do you see that they could be better suited?
I would characterize maybe a little bit differently, and I'm sorry if we maybe led you down the wrong path, but they are very qualified out in the states in terms of their function, their operations, and what they do. What they lacked experience was this was the first time that many of them have gotten federal money, and that they did not have a full understanding. And HAVA is a very unusually written law. There's a lot of vagueness in HAVA, but the state people are very, very qualified to do their job. But like I said, it's just the first time they received federal money, and there was a lack of policy and procedures on the part of the EAC and guidance that had been put out from the first couple of years. And the EAC has started several things in the last couple of years in terms of trying to help with that. So they now have established an advisory policy where if the state has a question on something, they can submit a question to the EAC and try to get that issue resolved up front before it becomes a problem. We have done some outreach with the EAC when there's NASHED meetings and NAS meetings. We will go out as a part of the EAC and try to help provide training as to what our audits are and how we go about doing our audits. And the EAC, as a part of that presentation, will then do what are the record-keeping requirements, what are the requirements that you need to make sure that you're adhering to, and things like that. So they are starting to move forward.
You cited the fact that this is a small agency. Do they have the capacity to fully do that? Are in really responding?
They are responding. Sometimes it does take a while, and I do think that is a function of resources, and some of these issues are very complicated, that they do require a lot of research and a lot of analysis before they can be resolved. But I do think that additional resources in that area would be helpful.
Mm-hmm. You also mentioned that the Inspector General, your audits have been based on looking at states that really had spent the most money.
Yes, ma'am.
That were audited. And I'm just wondering, are there other factors really at play in terms of what you should be focusing on?
Well, we also take a look at the single audit reports that were issued by the state auditors and by the CPA firms that did this, and we see if there's any issues that were identified there. We have gotten several requests from states to come in and do audits, and the EAC has specific concerns that they will relay those to us. So it all comes into play, but the biggest issue right now is how much money has been spent.
Mm-hmm. And in terms of doing your own investigations, you contract out a number of those, as I understand.
Yes, we do.
And would it be better if you had the capacity yourselves to do more of those? And what kind of inconsistencies do you find in the contracting audits?
In terms of the contracted investigations, we contract with another Inspector General's office to conduct those investigations. We've only had 2 of those since I've been with the EAC since 2006. I do not have enough work at this point for a full-time investigator. So that's one of the reasons why we're using outside investigators. If we start getting more investigative requests and more issues start coming up, then we'll go back and take a look at the workload and say, okay, do I have enough work at this point for an investigator?
But you're satisfied that that's worked out?
It has worked out very well because
consistency?
the agencies that we work with have been very good about giving us competent, capable investigators.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I would recognize my other colleague from California, Mr. McCarthy.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate you coming before us again, and I remember the last time you were here. And one thing I recall, back when I was actually a staffer and worked part within this committee, when Republicans took control in 1994, for the first time we did an audit inside this House. And one thing that we found, because no audit had ever been done prior, you actually didn't have the material needed to do it. So it took a couple years to get there. And knowing where we were with the EAC, I guess I'm maybe going down the same line as my colleague, Mr. Harper, did. If I could dwell a little more on the improvements, knowing that within the first audit, there's so much you got to get, much like Congress when they never had the accountability before, that you're bringing it in now. It takes a year or two to get to make sure you have the basis to account. But have you seen the improvement needed?
We're seeing some improvement. As I stated earlier, there's a lot of improvement still needed. The CFO was just appointed here in February of 2009, so they have not had an opportunity to go in and do everything they need to do in terms of trying to get ready for the audit. So there is still a lot of work to be done. There's a lot of internal control reviews that need to be done. There's a lot of account analysis that needs to be done. And just working with our service provider in terms of just getting the basis for our financial statements so that we can have them in time and try to get this whole process done. We do expect to see some significant improvements this year.
Well, maybe if I could step back. So when it gets finished, and I'm looking from this end, should I have much higher expectations that a year was long enough to get this all improved, even though the CFO just hired?
There will be improvements. Now, whether or not there will, I'm not going to sit here and say that everything will be fine, because it's not going to be. But we do expect to see improvements. I believe the CFO has committed to trying to get some of the internal control issues resolved. But the other thing you need to remember is that the auditors were not able to complete their audit last year. So as we start this time, as we do more testing, as we start, and we
may not have found all the problems.
We may not have found all the problems.
They may not be aware of some.
And right, they may not be aware of some of them. Okay, but I do believe the CFO will be able to provide us the data that we need to conduct the audit.
Well, should I be able to expect, or this committee should be able to expect, this time you'd be able to find all the problems that are able to be there within this?
We're hoping. That's the best I can say at this point, because until the audit is over, I cannot sit here and tell you in terms
But shouldn't
of
that be an expectation of ours, though? Within
it
a
should be
year?
an expectation. It's my expectation that we have all the issues identified this year. Now, whether or not we get there or not, I don't know. But like I said, that is my expectation.
And like most audits you read before, when you put the page back where you have the discrepancies or the concerns, will there be a timeline of what you have in there that you think these should be able to be accomplished by as well?
Is a part of the audit recommendations is that the agency gives us an implementation plan where they lay out when they think they're going to be able to get things done by. And that's what we track them on. So we say the agency, you have a problem in this area. If they agree with us and say, okay, this is our implementation plan, and they will establish benchmarks as to when they expect to get the stuff done, and that's how we track it.
Now, do they give you the benchmark or the timeline, or do you work with them to decide the timeline?
It varies. Most of the time, we will go with their timeline. If we think it's unreasonable, we may go back to them and say, okay, this is not reasonable. This is going to cause you a problem next year. But generally speaking, it's the agencies when they think they can get them implemented in terms of getting the problem fixed.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you, Mr. Crider. Clearly, we need to, I guess, speed up some of this action, and I'm glad that we have the commissioners here to talk to us next about their plans. If I can summarize in plain language, it sounds like what you're saying is we lack internal controls. We're not really where we need to be in terms of auditable material, and yet you haven't found any evidence that there's been misspending or corruption or anything of that nature. We just want to make sure that we have the controls in place, so on an ongoing basis, we'll always know that that's the case. Would that be a fair
That would
summary?
be a fair statement.
Okay. Good. Thank you very, very much. And we will keep the record open for 5 days for people who want to follow up with questions. And if we do have additional questions, we would ask that you, well, Mr. Gonzalez has walked in. I don't know whether you had a question for the Inspector General. We're just about to let him go. If you do, we'll hold him further, or no, he is waving off. We may have additional questions for you, and if we do, we would ask that you answer them promptly, and we do appreciate your testimony today.
Thank you,
And
ma'am.
now we will call up our second panel. We have today Commissioner Gineen Beach. Ms. Beach currently serves as the chair of the Election Assistance Commission, was appointed by President Bush in October of 2008. Prior to her appointment, Ms. Beach was an election counsel with this committee, as well as an election law advisor to former Maryland Governor Robert Ehrlich. Gracia Hillman is currently serving as the vice chair of the Election Assistance Commission and has served on the commission since her appointment in 2003. Ms. Hillman's prior work experience includes having served as executive director of the League of Women Voters in the United States, the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation, and the National Coalition on Black Voter Participation. We have Commissioner Donetta Davidson. Commissioner Davidson has served on the Election Assistance Commission since 2005, and she served as chair in 2007. Prior to her work with the EAC, Ms. Davidson served as the Arapahoe County Clerk and then Colorado Secretary of State, where she was president of the National Association of Secretaries of State and president of the National Association of State Election Directors. Ms. Davidson also served on the Federal Election Commission Advisory Panel and the Board of Directors of the Help America Vote Foundation. And finally, we have Mr. Thomas Wilkey. He is the Executive Director of the U.S. Election Assistance Commission, where he has served since 2005. Prior to his work with the EAC, Mr. Wilkey was the former director of the New York Board of Elections and founder of the National Association of State Election Directors. As you know, your full statements are, by unanimous consent, made part of our official record. We ask that your testimony to us be about 5 minutes, and that will give us time to ask questions. And Ms. Beach, may we begin with you?
Okay, thank you. Good morning, Chairwoman Lofgren, Ranking Member McCarthy, and distinguished members of the subcommittee. Thank you for inviting us to be with you this morning. As you know, the Commission's mission is to assist in the effective administration of federal elections. To achieve our mission, the EAC focuses on the following program areas. 1, overseeing and administering the federal voluntary voting system and testing certification program. 2, conducting research that assists election officials in making improvements. 3, developing clearinghouse materials to provide assistance to voters, election officials, and the general public. 4, managing HAVA funds, and 5, administering the National Voter Registration Form. In addition to the program work, we continue to strengthen internal operations. Last year, the Inspector General audited EAC's internal operations and provided us with 26 recommendations. These recommendations have led to a roadmap to make improvements, and you will hear about those activities in detail from the Executive Director, Tom Wilkey. Moving forward, while EAC must fulfill our financial management and reporting obligations, we must also provide resources to core program areas in need, like our voting system division. Vice Chair Hillman and Commissioner Davidson will describe in their testimony our efforts to devote considerable resources to the testing and certification of voting systems. As the chair of the EAC, my dual focus will be devoting all available resources to conducting core activities as described in the Help America Vote Act, and maximizing the use of our limited resources to meet all our objectives. We urge everyone to hold us accountable for our activities. To that end, the EAC recently adopted a strategic plan. It's available on our website, which clearly outlines our guiding principles. Among them are bipartisanship, transparency, professionalism, accountability, integrity, fiscal responsibility, and efficiency. The EAC has much work ahead of it, and some of it will not be easy. We've got to make sure our internal structure is sound and complies with all federal requirements. At the same time, we have to give staff the support they need to meet all of our HAVA requirements. I am confident we are on the right track and the right path to internal compliance and success in meeting our HAVA requirements. And thank you. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you. Ms. Hillman.
Good morning, Chairwoman Lofgren, Ranking Member McCarthy, and members of the subcommittee. For the record, my name is Gracia Hillman. Madam Chair, with the passage of the Help America Vote Act, I should turn the mic on, Congress set benchmarks and requirements for EAC to help improve the administration of federal elections. The public expects improvement, and EAC is committed to meet its obligations. My remarks today will highlight EAC's voting system testing and certification program. The federal testing and certification of voting systems is one of the most important components of HAVA. It is also the first time that the federal government has undertaken this initiative, which started in 2004 from ground zero with very limited resources. Our progress to develop and implement the program has been steady. The National Institute of Standards and Technology is our very valuable partner in this initiative, and we appreciate that Congress has recognized the need for increased funding to support the development and implementation of the program. Today, EAC testing and certification is a $2 million program with 4 full-time staff and 4 technical reviewers. This program has grown since 2006, when it had a budget of $700,000 and 1 staff person, and that does not include the monies we pay to the National Institute of Standards and Technology. By the end of this year, we expect to have 6 full-time staff plus the technical reviewers. We are mindful that this very small program has a very huge impact on elections in America. Madam Chair, it is important to remember that we are in a period of significant transition from the voting system technology of 2002 to the systems that are being tested today. The testing and certification process is complex. Some have been frustrated with the process and complained that it took too long to develop or is too complicated. Developing a new federal program of this magnitude takes time. I am pleased to say that the programs are operational and the process is working. Federal involvement and its obligation to transparency have created a dramatic change in the accreditation of laboratories and the testing and certification of voting systems. This change has created a culture shift that results in increased accountability to the public. Under HAVA, NIST provides EAC with lists of laboratories that are qualified to test voting systems. EAC worked with NIST to make certain that all documents concerning laboratory accreditation are timely posted on the Institute's website. Additionally, all voting system test plans and reports that are submitted to EAC from the labs are posted on our website. These postings include correspondence and related documents. Perhaps more importantly, Madam Chair, is that all of EAC's constituent partners have played important roles in the development of our testing and certification programs. The public has a full view of these programs through EAC's clearinghouse. We have dozens of documents on our website, and we regularly post new information. EAC is committed to be an active partner with our constituencies and a facilitator of information sharing and best practices. The growth of our programs has not happened in a vacuum. In 2008, the General Accountability Office issued reports on EAC's lab accreditation and testing and certification programs. EAC did not have the resources to undertake such reviews on its own, so we found GAO's recommendations to be very useful. For example, EAC has enhanced its requirements concerning the financial stability of labs in accordance with GAO's guidance. The EAC program manuals for lab accreditation and our testing are the rule books for how these programs operate. To enhance these programs, EAC has standard operating procedures. We are currently refining these procedures to incorporate several GAO recommendations. The result will be improved consistency of our technical reviews and approvals of recommendations from the testing labs. Madam Chair and members of the committee, In my entire career, I have encountered many challenging opportunities. Nothing has been more challenging than starting something new in federal government. In 5 short years, EAC's programs have evolved from concept to operational reality. This has not been an easy undertaking, but the benefits are measurable and rewarding. American voters deserve to know that their votes will be accurately and timely counted as cast. Thank you for the opportunity to address the committee today, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much. Ms. Davidson, we'd be pleased to hear from you.
Thank you, Chairwoman Lofgren and Ranking Member McCarthy and members of the subcommittee. My name's Donetta Davidson. My colleagues discussed where we've been. I'm going to discuss and talk to you about where we're going. The cornerstone of the EAC's work is to support the voting system testing and certification program. I want to focus on 3 areas today. 1, the voluntary voting system guidelines. 2, accountability and transparency. And 3, our partners with the National Institute of Standards and Technology. Last year, the public comment period for the next iteration of the VVSG ended. After reviewing 3,200 comments together with NIST, we realized that some of these recommendations for standards could not wait. We concluded that the program would benefit by revising the current VVSG now, while continuing also to move forward in developing the next iteration. Updating the 2005 VVSG now will result in greater consistency, more rigorous testing, and more efficiency overall. This process will be completely transparent and include public comment starting this summer. We will notify everyone when the public comment begins. Second, EAC's test voting systems. We test voting systems to determine how they meet the guidelines. Separate and apart from that, we also proceed to watch how the systems perform on Election Day. Therefore, the quality monitoring program is an important program that provides an additional layer of accountability and transparency. It's EAC's big stick. This program enables EAC to independently ensure fielded voting systems are continuing to comply with requirements. Manufacturers are required to submit any anomaly reports, and failure to do so may result in suspension or decertification. Election officials can also submit voting equipment performance issues to the Voting System Clearinghouse at the EAC, and it is available for everybody to view. Finally, a critical resource for the EAC is a partnership with NIST. Thanks to the support Congress gave this year, we have $4 million for NIST to assist us. Activities that is funded will include initial and follow-up reviews of our voting system test laboratories and the development of test suites. The first of these test suites are currently available for public to comment on, and we look forward to all the input that comes in. NIST is also conducting research for the EAC, which will help us and help provide states with voting processes for overseas and military. We will identify best practices and security concerns for using fax, email, and internet websites for both delivery and return ballots. We anticipate the delivery of these reports by the end of the year. I encourage everybody to visit our website and read the thousands of pages we've already posted, including everything from the draft test plans to current letters that go from our registered manufacturers. EAC remains committed to devoting considerable resources to our voting system testing and certification program. Our program director is in the process of hiring 2 new employees, and they also recently contracted with Mark Schall, who just retired from NIST, to serve as one of our technical reviewers. While we have hired a number of financial staff recently, it's important to remember we are very dedicated to our programs as well. Thank you, and now I'll turn it over to Mr. Wilkey, our Executive Director.
Thank you very much, and if you would begin, Mr. Wilkey.
Good morning, Chair Lofgren, Ranking Member McCarthy, and Subcommittee members. Thank you for inviting us to be with you today. Over the last few years, our Inspector General presented several assessments of the internal operations of the Commission, and they included 52 recommendations, on which 14 are closed. Make no mistake, some of the recommendations were tough. However, it was helpful to have, for the very first time, a complete list of the requirements we have to meet. We have a roadmap to compliance, and I appreciate the constructive criticism provided by our Inspector General. Striking a balance between meeting the goals of HAVA and getting our internal structure in order has been a challenge. In the beginning, our focus was on distributing the $3.1 billion of HAVA funds to the states, including setting up a process to audit and monitor these funds. Other HAVA-mandated activities included issuing the 2005 Voluntary Voting System Guidelines, working on the next iteration of guidelines, establishing the first federal government voting system testing and certification program, completing 80% of the mandated research as required by the Help America Vote Act, issuing guidance and best practices. Thanks to the hard work and dedication of our staff, we've got the job done. And for the past year, thanks to your support and to the other committees in Congress, we've had the resources to continue meeting the goals of HAVA and strengthen internal operations. Since the recommendations were issued, the EAC has hired a Chief Operating Officer, Chief Financial Officer, an Accounting Director, a Grants Manager, and a Contracting Officer. Contracted with a certified public accounting firm to assist with financial management, including a corrective action plan. Submitted our first performance-based budget for the 2010 budget to the Office of Management and Budget. Began updating documentation of financial management processes, procedures, and systems. Adopted, after a long and comprehensive review, a strategic plan on March 27, 2009. Established a roles and responsibilities policy for the commissioners and the executive director, and we continue to work on the assessment of internal controls. These are just a few of the activities completed and ongoing. The full list is available in our written testimony and our update to the Inspector General for his semi-annual report to the Congress. Starting a new federal agency is not easy, and I hope that our experience will provide insight to other commissions who may face similar circumstances in the future. I am proud of the accomplishments of the EAC staff. The internal improvements we make will help support their efforts to meet the requirements of HAVA and to improve the administration of federal elections. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much, and thanks to all the witnesses for your testimony. I would turn now to my colleague from California, Mr. McCarthy, for any questions he may have.
Thank you, Madam Chair. To the Executive Director, Mr. Wilkey. I noticed in the last testimony, Mr. Crider, that he actually hired the EAC former General Counsel to work in his office. So how long has the position of the EAC General Counsel been vacant?
I believe, Congressman McCarthy, the position has been vacant since last fall. We had an initial outreach to candidates, interviewed candidates, and made an offer on, and the commission then decided not to fill the position with that particular candidate. We are going back out for another recruitment effort. And as a matter of fact, that should...
Well, maybe if I can follow up a little on what you just said, because when I look at the Civil Rights Commission, and I ask unanimous consent to include in the record an excerpt from their minutes.
Without objection.
The staff director of the Commission on Civil Rights announced at a public meeting that the agency general counsel was leaving January 2nd. So is this the person you're referring to, that you made an offer in writing?
Yes, Congressman.
Was the offer accepted?
That we had initially made an offer, and then there was some problems with the first offer in the letter. He never did accept
Well,
to my knowledge,
why would the
second offer.
commission in their minutes say he had accepted the offer and he was leaving the
He
position?
did accept the first offer, yes.
So you sent a letter, he accepted the offer, and it was rescinded somehow, some way?
The next step in after offering the position was to have it ratified by a tally vote of the commission. And when that occurred, the vote of the tally vote ended up in a 2-2 tie, and we were not able.
Is that a public meeting?
No, because it was a personnel matter, the position was debated in a personnel session, and the offer was made, and a tally vote was taken.
In the letter of the offer, do you state in there that it will be upon the vote of the commission of whether the job will be accepted? Because how can you make an offer without the vote taking place?
I don't have the letter in front of me, Congressman.
Could you give me a copy of that letter?
I would certainly be happy to, Congressman.
I'm just a little concerned here. You make an offer to an individual, they accept, they tell another agency it's not, then behind closed doors, somehow the offer is rescinded. Was there some new discovery about this of why? I mean,
Congressman, since it was a personnel matter, it was discussed at great length by the commissioners. Certainly, the results of the tally vote we have provided on our website. The notations on the result of that tally vote are also a part of the record.
do you think that'll hurt you? And I mean, knowing you don't have a legal counsel, I'm just questioning, is there any obligation, since you put something in writing, offering a person a job? And I haven't seen the letter, so I don't know if you say it's contingent on a different vote somewhere else, and you don't have the legal counsel to even back you up within the offer. That one, does that create hardship in the future to fill the position? I noticed just today you've listed the new position again. But I'm also wondering from a legal perspective if the commission is somewhere legally bound because of the letter of the offer they sent in the first place. Have you had any outside counsel to advise you of this during this time?
We did have some background information from the counsel at the Office of Personnel Management. And we had, of course, counsel available to us. We presently have a deputy counsel and another associate counsel on staff, and that individual advised the members also.
And what was their legal advice to the members?
I did not, I'm not exactly sure what that advice, because that advice went directly to them. I believe that we followed all of the requirements that we had to make. And it was unfortunate, but when the tally vote was taken, the commissioners took another approach.
Is this how you do? Is this how you handle all job offers? You send a letter out, they accept, and then you come back to a vote?
The only two times that a tally vote is taken by the commission on a personnel matter is with two positions: the position I currently hold and the position of general counsel. Those are the two statutory positions that are appointed by the commission. All of the other remaining personnel, I do the recruitment and I make those appointments.
Okay. Well, Madam Chair, the only thing I would ask in the end that we follow up on this, if we could receive one, the letter of the offer that went forward, is the tally vote inside public of?
I think the testimony is that it is, yes.
Okay, so if we can receive that, that would be helpful, and if we could follow up on this.
Absolutely, Congressman.
Mr. Wilkey's indicated he will provide that information. I would turn now to Mr. Gonzalez for questions he may have.
Thank you very much, Chairwoman Lofgren. There's so much to cover, but I think, not to say it's a distraction, but it is of concern regarding expenditures and accountability within the commission, and of course the grant monies that go out. And so I'd like to concentrate more on the monies that go out to the recipients and how that is followed. And I know that in the written statement it does state that during the process collecting heavy expenditure information from the states, the EAC recognized that states needed clear direction and resources, that you teamed up with the Inspector General to provide additional training and added more resources on the EAC website. Internally, though, as far as personnel, not just a website, they call in or whatever, or the guidance that they seek, I'm talking about the recipients of our federal dollars, who do you have in the way of personnel, the numbers of individuals that you have? It's my understanding that you have fewer people available than you did, let's say, just even a year ago to assist the grant recipients. And I'll just open that to the chairwoman first.
Well, in the grants department and with the restructuring, we are hiring a grants manager grants manager has been hired, right? It started on Monday. So we do have another personnel there dedicated to that program.
Is that you have a greater number of people in, let's say, this particular aspect of the programs than you did a year ago? Fewer number? I mean, my understanding is that you don't have an actual person or a number of people you had previously to assist the grant recipients. And I don't know if that's true or not. You're going to bring someone on board. Where will that put you relative to, let's say, where you were just a year ago?
Congressman Gonzalez, if I might,
Yes,
we
ma'am.
do not have fewer people on staff to handle questions and provide technical assistance to grant recipients. We have the same number as we had a year ago. The addition of a grants person addresses some of the concerns that were raised by the Inspector General and others with respect to being able to do a higher level of review. So we are increasing our internal process and accountability, but with respect to people available to the states and to our program grant recipients, we have the same number.
Right. And the reason I ask that, obviously, there is so much work to be done and it's been a long process, and we all have our differences, but you have your mission and your goals. The last thing we need is anything that is internal in nature regarding the expenditures by the commission internally. And definitely the last thing we would need is someone out at the local state level that's a recipient that in good faith attempts to administer the money but makes a mistake. Because I don't think that you have someone that intentionally goes out there to misuse or misapply the monies. But they're looking to you for the guidance. I'm just one last question, and we could go many places, and we will be revisiting specific endeavors of the commission throughout the year. But when I'm back home, and I don't know if other members, when I talk to my election officials or elected officials that understand that after Bush versus Gore, we created Help America Vote Act and such, and the commission, and they really want to know what we've accomplished in all of these years in light of, let's say, this is April, and we still don't have a United States Senator from Minnesota. We had election results last night in New York.
We can't blame the commission for that.
What I'm saying is they just really want to know what work have we done that would have assisted these jurisdictions from avoiding the controversies that we have today. I know you can always look to the courts and take that a further step and take it out of our jurisdiction. But truly, I think people are trying to get a handle on what is it that we're doing up here to give guidance and assistance to these jurisdictions so that maybe we don't have these problems. And I would just ask, in Minnesota's case, is there anything that we have done, is there anything that we can do to avoid situations that have developed recently?
The Election Assistance Commission has published a number of best practices, shared practices under our management guidelines, covering everything from chain of custody of voting systems to production of ballots to training of poll workers to assist. As you know, many of the things are operated under state law. So EAC can provide guidance, best practices, and information to help the states do an assessment of what they can do. With respect to recounts, EAC has undertaken the required study of that, but unfortunately, our study was not published before Minnesota. I mean, in elections, you can't guess when is going to be the next challenging issue. But hopefully, between lessons learned from Minnesota and the information coming out of our vote recount study, states will be able to learn should they ever encounter a similar situation.
Thank you. My time's expired. I yield back.
Thank you. Mr. Harper.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Wilkey, on this offer that was extended on General Counsel and accepted, was the revisit on the terms, was that just talking about some of the details? Is that what that involved?
Congressman, I can't recall, but I know that we issued 2 letters. The second letter, whether it was an issue with the start date or some other a detail that was missing from the first letter, I'm not having the information in front of me. I'm not sure, but certainly would be happy to provide you with all of that information.
Certainly on that first offer and acceptance, at that point, you thought you had your next General Counsel and he thought he had a job. Is that fair to say?
Well, certainly in his case, he thought we did. And now whether that was properly, whether the information regarding the tally vote was properly given to him or whether he understood it is another matter. But the second step after the offer, of course, was to do a tally vote of the 4 commissioners.
But it was your recommendation that he become your General Counsel, or it wouldn't have come up for a tally vote, I assume.
It certainly was not in my purview to recommend. That particular employee is a direct appointment of the 4 commissioners. As I indicated previously, the only 2 positions in the agency that are directly filled by the commissioners is the position that I hold and the position of General Counsel.
But as the executive director, they're certainly going to want your input on this process. Who calls down the applicants to bring it up for a tally vote? Is that you or a group or somebody else?
Certainly, we all participated. I participated with the commissioners because of the way that the statute is structured. While the position is appointed by the commission, the individual reports to me as their supervisor. So certainly, they did ask for my opinion in the process, and I gave that opinion. It was a matter of our discussions behind closed doors as a personnel matter.
And what was your opinion, a thumbs up or a thumbs down, without giving details?
Without giving details, I believe it was a thumbs up.
And in your opinion, he was qualified for this position. He had experience in another agency or area.
Well, I might also include that there were 2 individuals that came down to the last 2 that was debated by the commission, and I actually gave thumbs up to both of them. The question to me was, would you be comfortable working with these individuals? And I said yes to both of them.
Would you provide us with copies of all correspondence and emails regarding that hire?
I would be happy to do so, Congressman.
Okay, including any internal notes?
Absolutely.
Okay. Now, why was he not approved, in your opinion?
I don't know. I believe that the tally votes, if once you see the notations on the tally votes, that will speak for itself.
Okay.
And of course, we will be happy to provide that to you and to the committee.
Well, I just have to ask this question. Was it because he was a Republican?
I don't believe so. I can't answer that. Again, the notations were part of the tally vote, and they have to speak for themselves.
Okay. And you'll provide that information to us?
Absolutely, sir.
Now, obviously, being the rookie on the committee and learning this process, first of all, I know your job's not easy, and you have an important responsibility. I was on the election task force as the token Republican in Mississippi in 2001, and had a great experience as we went through that process. But I would say that when I see things, the use of taxpayer money, even if it's for something as what seemingly is insignificant as T-shirts, I would say that that's not an appropriate use of taxpayer money, in my opinion, and I'd hope we wouldn't do that in the future, and that we'd look at that information. But thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Congressman.
Thank you. Congresswoman Davis.
Thank you all. I wanted to go back to Mr. Crider's statement and initially to the commissioners to give you an opportunity to speak to the fact that there was some concern that a lot of the hires were more or less top-heavy positions and not some of the mid-level positions that would have helped with the certification process in the different states. And I just wanted to give you an opportunity to respond to that. Is that an assessment that to just justify why some of those hires were more at the top-level positions?
Congresswoman, we only saw the testimony of the Inspector General this morning, and we may have some differences of opinion on how individuals were categorized. Certainly, as I indicated in my testimony and my remarks earlier, we had a great deal of work to do in the area of our financial administration. I agree with our Inspector General in his comment that while we are small, we still had to meet the very same requirements as the big agencies in the federal government. And certainly they had a lot more individuals to be able to handle that. And so that was an eye-opening to us. We have met that head-on. We have brought in some very talented individuals so that hopefully when our audit comes up again this year, you'll see a dramatic difference in how it looks between the 2 years.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I think recognizing that it is important to establish morale at a small agency and to really get up and running, that's somewhat understandable. Just going back to my colleague, and I think that, as I understand it, it's a small issue, but I think sometimes it's kind of symbolic. Again, let me just give you an opportunity, if you'd like, to explain the T-shirt issue in terms of the number of people that you had on staff and the cost. Is there something in this that we're not getting that really you'd like to just explain briefly so that people go away with a different impression?
Certainly, Congresswoman. When that issue was first raised with me and the idea was raised with me, I certainly had some concerns myself. However, we wanted to do something for a non-cash employee incentive. And so I directed our Chief Operating Officer, our Contracting Officer, and our Human Resources Specialist to reach out, to research the various regulations and rules, particularly as with regards to the Office of Personnel and Management, to get their take on it. And they informed us that it had been done, and certainly in other agencies is provided for under the statutes and under the regulations. And it gave our employees some pride in our agency. We do a lot of outreach. We have meetings of our various boards, and I think our employees enjoyed having the opportunity to wear something that had a symbol of our agency. Would we do it again? Given the concern that has been raised, Congresswoman, I doubt that it would happen again. But we certainly took great care, and I certainly reached out to someone, for example, our contracting officer who's been in the federal government for many years, has an unlimited warrant, and level 3 as a matter of fact. And I depended, and he gave me what I thought was a reasonable response and allowed us to move forward. And whether we would do it again, I think is questionable, Congresswoman.
Thank you. Appreciate anybody else want to respond? Okay. One of the roles that you play is working with the states, and we're also looking here at fraud, not fraud and abuse, but really how people can be more efficient and lean. Are you able to intervene if you are aware of some practices that really aren't working for people? I mean, can you play that kind of activist role, or are you really more in the role of responding to requests and interests that the states have?
Congresswoman, I know that Commissioner Hillman mentioned in her testimony earlier something that we are very, very proud of, and that is our management guidelines and our quick start guides. They have been overwhelmingly received by election administrators all over the country. There are some 16 or 17 of them now on a wide range of election administration issues, from, counting absentee ballots, which they're probably going to need in New York in the next few days, to other activities, including UWCABA, poll worker training, and a number of others. These go directly into the hands of local election administrators, some 7,000 of them. That is what we feel, in addition to working with our colleagues at the state level, something that we can do to get information directly into the hands of local election administrators, and they have been well received. So we try to make efforts such as that. Certainly in the audit area, we do so also. It is my responsibility, once the IG, to give us an audit.
If I just could interrupt really quick, do you see yourselves in a role as well in terms of not making policy necessarily, but providing some advice, even to the extent of internet voting for military overseas voting? Is that an area that you expect to weigh in on at some point?
Right now, it's currently, we have the first study that was given to us by the National Institute of Standards and Technology on internet, and it included several things: fax, anything that was really moving the ballots out faster. And they're in their second phase now of providing us with best practices and security issues for fax and web-based and internet. So we expect that to come out, and from there, then we will be giving guidelines or really best practices to everybody. And obviously, we take what states are doing currently and study, and that's what NIST is doing currently, and really reviewing what the states are doing and how they've moved, because some of the states have moved forward.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for the additional time.
Thank you. I turn to the gentleman from Alabama.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I will probably not take the full 5 minutes, but I wanted to just ask one question, in particular of the three commissioners who were here. Let me try to get some self-assessment from the commission about whether you were surprised by the findings of this audit. Was this news to you, or based on your own work on the commission, did you see some of these findings coming? And I will start with the Vice Chairman, but former Chairwoman, Ms. Hillman.
The recommendations and findings of the Inspector General, the substance of those were very helpful. When EAC was established in 2003, there was no place we could go to know the full breadth of what we had to do to establish EAC as a federal agency in compliance with federal requirements. And so we were building the house and the foundation at the same time, with our responsibilities to get requirements payments to the states, to do the HAVA mandated study, to figure out how to staff the commission, and to also be mindful that there were things that we were going to have to do. So I would say that for the most part, there were no surprises to me. The frustration was, how could we possibly come up to speed in such a short period of time, and finally having to accept that we couldn't, that we were just going to have to do the very best that we could to sort of prioritize the items, and we're well on our way. We're light years away from where we were 2 years ago. And I would say that it is constructive, and I would think for Congress, I think that the General Services Administration can play a very valuable role to small commissions if they could only staff and resource themselves to do it. I think there was an assumption on Congress's part that we would get that kind of technical assistance from a place like GSA or OPM, or even the Office of Management and Budget. And I will say that the Office of Management and Budget was probably the most helpful of the three agencies. What I'm afraid of is, I call it the bottomless pit. Are there more items we don't know about? And I think the Inspector General addressed that the next audit may reveal some things that we don't yet know we're supposed to have in place as a federal agency.
Ms. Beach, would you or Ms. Davidson like to briefly weigh in on that same question, the extent to which you were surprised by the findings of the audit?
Well, I will say, when I first became aware of the audit, I was actually counsel to this very committee, so in fact...
I knew I recognized you from somewhere.
I certainly was surprised, but now in this new role and recognizing the challenges that a new agency has and having now the roadmap and being aware of what we can do, I think we are on a good way and a good path to fulfilling all our obligations and working towards our goals.
Let me raise one other thing that may be a little bit less dramatic, but it jumped out at me, the fact that apparently the commission's having some trouble filling mid-level staff positions, and if I'm reading this correctly, there's a significant number of full-time positions that have not been filled. Am I reading that right?
I don't think so. I'm going to defer to the executive director. There are some new positions with this budget, once we got out of the continuing resolution, that are now being filled. But I wouldn't say that we're having problems filling positions.
Mr. Wilkey, you're nodding your head.
Congressman, no, at this time we haven't. We had initially some problems filling our CFO position. There's a lot of competition for CFOs, and we found that out. Because there's a cap on the salary, while we had a number of very good candidates, they were not willing to take the salary that we were willing to offer.
Well, let me interrupt you just enough to, I guess, point out this sentence, and maybe the confusion is this is not from the report. It's something that's referenced in the document I have, though. It says, some advocates remain concerned, but not enough mid-level staff have been employed to carry out the EAC's programmatic responsibilities. Does that resonate with you at all, Mr. Wilkey, the concerns about not having enough mid-level staff to do some of the basic operating work of the commission?
No, I don't agree. I think no one has suffered. We filled some very, very important positions in our financial end based upon the results of our audits and our conversations with OPM and OMB, who fully supported us in this. We took the step, I took the step to have OPM, for example, come in and evaluate every single job in our agency to do an assessment and an evaluation of the salary level and so on, and to see if they were appropriate for that job title. We will continue, and my goal is that we have reached the capacity in a number of areas. However, as we move forward, additional employees will be in our certification and testing program, and we are making great strides. We are bringing 2 additional people in. We are working with a university in the state of Georgia who has the responsibility for the voting system testing program in the state of Georgia, and has some terrific graduate students. We're working with that university, continue to bring graduate students in to work with us. They are our future. As a matter of fact, Congressman, I'm working with a university in your home state, Auburn University, which was the first university in the nation to have a graduate program in election administration. And I'm continuing to work with them in providing opportunities at the ground level. So I assure you, Congressman, as well as the members of the committee, that our program activities will continue to be met, and we will continue to make resources available to all of our program units as we move along.
Okay, thank you.
I'll just follow up with a couple of questions. We realize that you started from scratch and that you have made an effort to move forward, but at this point, I think out of the 29 recommendations and the assessment from February of 2008, I think only 9 have been done, and at least that's the report we got. If that's not correct, tell me. And whatever the number is, I'd like to know whether you expect that all of them will be done, and if not, what assistance do you need to get them all done?
Madam Chair, as we were completing our assessment and giving further information to the Inspector General for his semi-annual report, we sought the assistance of some outside help to have us look at it, people who have been in this arena for many years. And we came upon the fact that there were some 30 of those recommendations that were really duplicate recommendations. And so we thought to consolidate those so that the reports that you will be getting now will focus in on where we are. We certainly have a roadmap to get there. There are issues that will be coming up that we will close within the next couple of months. I see on my list here some by June 30th, some by the 31st of July, then again in August and September. I asked staff last night, knowing that we would be here and that we had just recently come across this discrepancy, to give me an updated listing of where we are in terms of those recommendations and our blueprint for doing that. And I certainly would offer this for the record.
We'll be happy to receive that and review it.
Madam Chair, if I might just
Of
also
course.
add that some of the recommendations couldn't be implemented until others had been done. For example, we needed the chief financial officer in place for other kinds of policies to be developed. So I would expect once the core staff coming out of the Inspector General's recommendations are in place, we will see the evolution of some of the others, and we should be, or we will be in a very different place by the end of the year.
Well, that's good to hear, and I realize that although some of these recommendations may not have the stature of the the testing program, which is key, and all these other things, we just have to get them done, and so that people can have confidence. And I know that you recognize that. And I have one final question, and it really relates to the research department and as you'll recall, was it last year that there was the general counsel's office and the research department were criticized or accused of altering research? I'm not saying that was true, untrue, false, or indifferent, but there was a recommendation that there be a peer review process so that that could never come up again. Has that assessment been done? Has it been approved? Is it in place now?
Congresswoman, we have taken the steps that every single document, in particular our research documents, are vetted by our Standards Board and our Board of Advisors. As you know, under the HAVA, we have a 110-member Standards Board and 37-member Advisory Board. And now all of our research activities will be presented to them for review either directly at their meetings, or we are using a virtual website to get
well, the recommendation was that there would be some formal peer review process. Are you suggesting that this kind of commission oversight is the formal review process?
This is part of the review process. I can tell you that, for example, in our management guidelines program, we are careful to bring in a working group of state and local election officials, depending on what subject it is and if they have expertise in that area, to work with us as part of a peer review.
Well, maybe what I can do is ask you to send to us your peer review assessment process.
Absolutely.
And then we'll take a look at it and see, maybe we can have a dialogue on whether we have a meeting of the minds on whether that process is what we really thought it was going to be, and have some further discussions if we have questions. And on that note, I would note that we have a lot of work to do. We do thank you for your service. I'm thinking that this is the spring towards the fall, we ought to have a follow-up here to see where we are on these audit issues, and as well as some of the other items you're working on, but specifically the IG's recommendation in the hopes that we can check off a bunch of boxes. So with that, if there aren't further questions, we will thank you for your testimony. Note that we have, the record will be held open for 5 days. If members have additional questions, we will forward them to you and ask that you respond as promptly as possible. Thank you very much. This hearing is adjourned.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, sorry, we have a full committee hearing that's going to be starting, and we're going to need to prepare the hearing room. So if folks wouldn't mind, just after you get your stuff together, please taking all conversations into the hall. Thanks.